So don't worry, if you start saying something, you're like, that wasn't what I wanted to say. So, do you have something? Should I
wear my hat or no hat?
Howdy YouTube family, it is Bolt CRNA coming to you again with another day's topic. Today I've got my buddy over here, Bryan Archpru, CRNA. He has created an invention, the Air Angel Blade. He's doing some great things in the anesthesia community. Thanks for coming on today, Bryan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And so we're gonna talk a little bit about his background, what made him become a CRNA, his journey to where he's at now in his career, and about his new videolaryngoscope. Let's get into it. So Bryan, let's first get started and let everybody know what's your background, what brought you into the nursing field, and how did you become a CRNA?
All right, so I'm originally from Hawaii. I was born and raised there. I went to the University of Hawaii at Manoa for college, and my roommate, who I met my freshman year, he was going to nursing. His mom and his dad were both nurses, and he knew what he wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. He convinced me to take a couple of classes, science classes with him. I said, sure, why not? So we did it together. We took some prerequisites together. He convinced me that we could work, just a couple days a week, surf a whole bunch of other days out of the week, and it'd just be this amazing lifestyle.
That's very Hawaiian of you. Yeah.
To me, that sounded like a pretty good deal. So, I kind of, fell into it that way. I got into the nursing school, so I went to the University of Hawaii's nursing program. Once I graduated there, I went and worked in critical care as a nurse. My last semester there at the nursing program, we had some guest speakers, some advanced practice guest speakers, and one of our guest speakers was a CRNA. And his whole lead into his talk was why he had the best job in the world.
True.
And what he said really resonated with me, and he was incredibly smart, well-spoken. I could just tell by the conversation that he had with us that he really believed in what he said. And so after that class, I reached out to him, and he allowed me to shadow him in the operating room. And that experience just kind of blew my mind, like, wow. He had so much autonomy. He was a director of a military CRNA program in Hawaii at the time, and he worked with students. I followed him and a student nurse anesthetist that day, and I just thought, wow, if I could even be in a place like this, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
So I carried that along with me as I graduated.
So you jumped ship from the wanting to work 3 days a week as a bedside nurse, not have to work too hard, surf on the weekend. You're like, let me sign up for the hardest specialty in nursing with the most time commitment in science.
Yeah, I think so. My buddy who was supposed to go to nursing school with me, he ended up going to nursing school in another program, and so we weren't together surfing anymore as much. He moved to Maui, and so during our prerequisite classes, living the life. We were doing classes together. We were going to the beach all the time together, and it was great. But then I got into the University of Hawaii's nursing program, and he got into a different nursing program, and so we kind of split apart temporarily at that time period. Going through clinicals, I think it was a pretty quick realization for myself personally. And everybody can find their own track within the nursing field and find things that they love. But I was really drawn toward critical care in my clinical experience. I did the floor nursing, I did psych, I did labor and delivery, and all these other specialties.
Really? You worked on all those floors?
For nursing school as part of a clinical rotation.
Yeah.
They were required for us, and each of those were a big no to me. I would dread almost going to those clinical rotations. But when I went to critical care, it was exciting. There was so much to learn, and not that the others don't have their own specialties, but it just really blended with things that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to have some really great mentors that were nurses in the critical care area. And that really opened the door for me to get a job in that unit that I did my last rotation in.
Nice. So a lot of people ask me that all the time. They're like, how do you get into the ICU as a new graduate? What did you do to get in?
So I did a specialty rotation as a nursing student. Put a lot of hours in there as a nursing student. I actually did a research project for the nurse manager that semester, which actually helped them build some data for a protocol, a sepsis protocol that they were coming out with. So it was a little bit above and beyond what I think they required of regular students kind of coming through that ICU. It really helped me forge a lot of good connections in that unit. And they offered me a job there after I graduated.
That's
so
awesome.
it was a big teaching hospital in Honolulu. So they had...
Was that Queens?
It was Queens Hospital,
Queens Medical Center.
Yeah. It's their trauma center. It's all the residents learn there from their medical program. They have a neuro ICU, CV ICU, a medical ICU. And my rotation was in the medical ICU, and that's really where I met my connections, and that's where I got my first job in the medical ICU when I graduated. Yeah, you know, as far as going to CRNA school, so once I got out and graduated and started working in the medical ICU, as I was working there, I think the idea that did I want to be an ICU nurse for the rest of my life, I pretty quickly came to and I wanted to give it a shot. I wanted a fair shot as far as what I wanted to do in the future, and I just couldn't see myself being a critical care nurse forever. I love certain parts of the job, but you know, as far as a good balance for my life and what I could see myself really being fulfilled in, I felt like there was probably something else.
Right.
And
it's tough. It's tough work.
It is. It's really hard, and there are a lot of great nurses there who've been doing it for, you know, a really long time. And I give them so much credit for it. But for myself, I just felt like, especially with my experience in shadowing, you know, CRNA who came and spoke to my program, and knowing that was out there, I really, graduating, I knew critical care was what I wanted to do, not just because I liked it, because I knew it kind of set me up potentially for the path of becoming a CRNA. And so again, going through that year, I contemplated a lot about just being an ICU nurse, maybe transferring a different type of unit. But anesthesia kind of just kept coming back into the realm of things. You know, as soon as I could, I applied for CRNA school. So probably about a year out from being a new grad, I applied for schools, and probably by the time I was about 2 years out as a new grad, I started my CRNA program.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you'd done 2 years in the ICU, got into CRNA school. Where did you go to CRNA school at?
I went to Kaiser Fullerton's program.
Kaiser Fullerton, okay.
Yeah, so I did medical ICU for a year, and then I actually job shared with the CV ICU because my buddy, who had gone to Maui to go to school, had come back and started working in their cardiac ICU at Queens.
Cool.
And so I got to know their manager. I started job sharing, so I was working part-time in the medical ICU, and I knew that being a part of a surgical ICU was probably a good background to have for being an anesthesia school. So I started job sharing, and then once I got into cardiac ICU, I thought, man, this is really cool. And eventually I tapered off of the medical ICU, and I just went full-time cardiac for, you know, maybe the last year as I worked as a critical care nurse.
So did you just apply to Kaiser?
I applied to a program in Arizona, Midwestern State University. They were pretty new at the time.
Yeah.
I started my program in like 2009. That's when I started my CRNA school. So it's been a while. But yeah, I applied for Midwestern, and I did get into their program. I found out I got into the program just a little bit before I was leaving to go to the interview at Kaiser. And in my mind, I was actually thinking about not going to the interview because at the time Kaiser was really, I knew it was very competitive. It was in a state that I thought was going to be, you know, climate wise and people, you know, culture wise, not that much of a culture shock for me because I lived in Hawaii my whole life, right? So I wanted to stay close to home on the West Coast. It'd be an easy flight back to Hawaii. To me, it was the most ideal place to get into school. So it was kind of a pipe dream school for me. But I went to the interview anyways, and I was really fortunate. I got into the program, and they really impressed me there, so I ended up deciding to go to Kaiser's program.
Nice. What was your experience like in Kaiser's program? Did you enjoy it through the program? Was it hard to you?
Yeah, I was so fortunate. There was, you know, I think this is pretty rare, but the class that I was a part of had four guys who were from Hawaii.
Wow.
And so it was really easy to make a connection within the class, and everybody in the class was great. But yeah, I made some great friends there. Immediately had a group of guys we could study with and hang out, and to me, CRNA school was, I always say it was one of the most fun times I can remember. You know,
really?
It was just me and my wife at the time. We moved to Pasadena. We were just enjoying ourselves. Yeah, school was hard and it was intense, but just making a lot of friends. We did a lot of driving for clinicals. I get to meet a lot of really, really interesting people from all over the place there in that program, and it was a great experience. I really enjoyed school.
Yeah. School can definitely be a good experience, but it also depends on the people around you, like your life situation. So like you had everything
that's so
wrapped
true.
up
Yeah,
perfectly.
absolutely. There was a lot of support within that program. Our instructors were awesome. School was very close to where I live, so that wasn't too much of an issue. We did do a lot of driving for clinicals, but the program gave me an opportunity to actually go back and do a clinical part of my clinicals in Hawaii. Hawaii has a Kaiser hospital there.
Nice.
And so I got to go back to Hawaii. Me and my wife were back in Hawaii for a while doing clinicals there, and that was amazing, and the people there are fantastic, and so that was another really cool part about my program.
So it sounds like you did fairly well in CRNA school and it went smoothly for you, but I want to hear about what is the biggest struggle that you dealt with in CRNA school. What was the worst thing about CRNA school for you?
For me, one of the hardest parts about CRNA school wasn't necessarily the school itself, it was family things that happened during the program. There were some family situations and other things like that happened in the program that really took a lot of focus away from the studies and stuff like that. And I don't really want to go too much into it, but
personal family stuff,
personal
that comes up.
Stuff
it will come up with anyone's family, whether
For
you're
sure.
married, you got kids, whatever situations you have going on. I was single, no kids, not married, and I still had family stuff come up with my mom and my brother and other people in your life. So no matter what situation you live in, you're gonna have family stuff come up at some point in your program that's gonna be a struggle and a problem.
That was honestly the most stressful part from my personal experience. But my wife was super supportive. My family was super supportive. The Kaiser family, all the instructors, the professors, my classmates. I can't say better things about them. Yeah, they really helped make it possible for me to graduate and to come out with a great experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you graduate from Kaiser's program. Your first job, you move up to the Bay Area to work up here?
Yeah, originally I thought I was going to work in Hawaii. I had they had given me a scholarship to go to school, come back and work at Kaiser Hawaii. But when I graduated, there really weren't any jobs available. And what's really interesting is that one of my first rotations, my clinical rotations down in Southern California where I work, a clinical preceptor who I got along with great, and she just so happened to move up to the Bay Area, get a job there. And then through the grapevine, when I graduated, I had heard through her that there was a position open at the hospital that I ended up working at as a new grad. So having that connection from one of my very first clinical rotation sites, I mean, that goes to show that you just really never know where these opportunities come from. When I went and applied, she remembered me. She helped me a lot in getting the manager's email or the chief's email there. Yeah, so it was a big deal.
Nice.
It kind of segued me into knowing that position was a solid position. The practice was well-rounded. The people there were really nice. It really set up a lot of things. And actually, me and my wife had visited friends in the Bay Area while I was going to school in Southern California, and we actually thought this was a really cool place.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool area. We both live up here now, and I have to say it's great. I mean, it's an awesome opportunity to work up here, to live up here. But you get up here and you start working. You're not coming up here with the idea that you're going to invent new things or create new innovations. You're here just to learn to practice, right? To be the best CRNA clinic that you can be and to get your feet wet. At what point did that change and you start branching off into, I'm going to innovate and create new things?
Honestly, I never really saw myself as an innovator or a creator. I just get interested in lots of different things, whether it's sports, whether it's photography, another hobby that I have, or traveling, or anesthesia, things that just interest me. I tend to kind of get very focused in and go with. I have a very good friend who's an entrepreneurial type of guy, and just having a relationship like that really showed me that you can have an idea, go with it, and like really incredible things can happen. And so I think that friendship really allowed me to feel like, if I have an idea, why not try to problem solve or or see how far I can take certain things.
Yeah.
And there was a time in my life, this was about 2000, this was a few years ago, if we're talking specifically about the Angel project now, that I was tinkering with the idea of 3D modeling and 3D printing. It actually was based off of my desire to actually invent a medical device. And I wanted to figure out how to create a prototype. And I figured out the cheapest way, after talking to some people, is to try to 3D print it. But while I got into, it's a kind of separate story, but that segued me into learning how to do 3D modeling and kind of getting interested in that. And once I got interested in that, I wanted to figure out how 3D modeling and anesthesia, could go together. And so I started kind of just Googling or searching online about different applications of 3D printing. And 3D modeling had in the field of anesthesia, and I came across a really cool idea that someone had created in creating a low-cost videolaryngoscope system for third world countries and foreign missions and things like that. I'm not sure if your viewers are really familiar with what a videolaryngoscope is, but it's a tool that's used to place a breathing tube or to intubate somebody, and it has a little camera at the tip that allows you to, instead of doing a direct laryngoscopy where you're using a physical, normally a medical or plastic instrument, lift the tongue out of the way and actually visualize the vocal cords to pass the breathing tube or the endotracheal tube through the cords. This one allows you to look at a screen while you're manipulating the blade. And usually it's hyperangulated or there's a curved tip, so it tends to be used for difficult airways. There's some literature out there that may support the idea that first attempts are more successful with it, that it potentially can cause less tissue trauma. And really, in most developed countries around the world, it's really the gold standard now for difficult airways management.
If we were to see someone in our practice that had a difficult airway, we assumed it would be a struggle, we would automatically go with a videolaryngoscope. A more widely known brand like GlideScope or McGrath blades or a CMAC blade. These are highly produced blades that many hospitals across the nation have. They're expensive. They're not cheap. They're expensive. So for us to be able to use that as a gold standard here, you realize you would like to create something like that for somewhere that may not be able to afford that expensive equipment, right?
And like I said, I definitely did not invent the idea of it. That idea was out there. When I got, so you're right. So like a normal videolaryngoscope can cost thousands of dollars, right? And it's just not attainable or affordable for somebody in a third world country to really have access to that. Again, researching and seeing how kind of 3D modeling or 3D printing and anesthesia kind of cross each other's paths. I said somebody out there was able to figure out that they could 3D print the blade handle part of the videolaryngoscope blade and combine that with a flexible videoscope. That's very easy to find online, and these are flexible, they're waterproof, they can plug in physically to Android phones, smartphones, tablets, computers. They have wireless ones that can go into iPhones or any other, Wi-Fi accepting device. And they're very cheap. I think they're designed to like look behind walls, down drains, and there's a lot of utility for it. But somebody figured out that you could use that flexible scope and put it inside of this plastic 3D printed blade, hook it up to a smartphone, and boom, you've got a reliable videolaryngoscope system that somebody who's going to go on a foreign missions to a really remote area can use, or somebody in a third world country who wants to have one for themselves can affordably make and resource for themselves. And so I got really interested in that idea. And I thought, hey, why not see if I could make one myself? I was able to find, there's an online modeling program called Fusion 360 that you can go online, and I think you can download it free for like a year. If you're in education or in a program somewhere, I think you can get like 3 years out of it for free. It's like a really high quality program. And there's tons of YouTube tutorials on it, and I basically, learn how to do the basic things I needed to do through YouTube. Thought like, why don't I try to see if I could make my own blade design, because when I looked online, I couldn't find anybody who had a 3D file available for me to easily download. And there's a lot of big 3D file sharing websites out there, and none of them really had a high quality file out there. And the websites that I looked at had pictures of the blades that they printed for their projects, felt like could be improved.
Yeah.
And again, all the websites and articles, and some even published things at the time that talked about this low cost videolaryngoscope type of system, always kind of came to the conclusion within their article or whatever, is that, you know, this has the potential to work, or it worked in this situation, but future studies are needed. So nobody was really taking it that next step. And that's kind of where I saw the gap, is there nobody was really taking it that next step. There was no easy 3D file to download, and there was no YouTube tutorial on how to actually put it together or anything like that. So I thought, you know, why don't I try to make one myself? And that's when I downloaded the Fusion 360. I kind of did some self tutorials, and it took me a couple of weeks, and I created a file on my laptop, and I just uploaded it to a website called shapeways.com, and there's many other 3D printing websites out there. But you basically just upload the file, you can pick your color, and you just print it and you pay for it, and they'll ship it to you in like a couple of weeks.
How much does it cost to print one?
It really depends on what materials you print it with. So what I like about Shapeways is they print with a really high quality nylon plastic, which is, there are like medical grade nylon plastics out there, and the plastic that we print it with, it's like it's dishwasher safe, it's chemical resistant, it's heat resistant, to the point where you could put in an autoclave machine and it wouldn't warp or damage or anything. So it's super strong, super robust. And but if you go now through our website, and if you were to buy one through Shapeways, it costs probably about $90 or something like that.
Okay.
But in the scope of things, you know, versus like several $1,000s.
Still much cheaper.
Still much cheaper.
It is.
How we've made it more affordable. You don't have to buy it through our website. You can basically download the file from our website, and you can print it yourself at home if you have a 3D printer for much cheaper, because the plastic itself, depending what type of plastic you print it with, can be much more affordable. But it also allows people in other countries to, you know, 3D print it for themselves for a much lower cost. So we do give it the option on our website for people to purchase the blade, like a very high quality blade. But
so they can either purchase it through your outlet, or they can take the file themselves if they have a printer, a 3D printer, you know, person who will do it for cheaper. You know, they can do it cheaper in their country. So it's totally open to them, depending on what their budget is, what they want to spend.
So let me back up a little bit before I kind of got ahead of myself with the printing and the downloading, all that stuff. But going back to actually creating the very first blade that I had, once I printed it, I bought a scope online for like, I think through Amazon for maybe about $10 or something like that. Hooked it up to a laptop, and it really worked. It looked really cool. It looked like it was going to be, it's got a really good chance of being successful. Luckily, I had a few coworkers who were going on a medical mission trip to the Philippines at the time. And so I convinced them, hey, well, I didn't convince them, I asked them, hey, would this be useful for you guys on the trip? Having a videolaryngoscope, and they didn't have access to one on their medical mission, so they said, sure. They'd be totally interested in taking it. So I showed them how to use it. I had an Android smartphone. It's a Samsung S3. I think my dad had it in a shoebox laying around. And I think you can get it on Craigslist for like $30 or $40 or something like that. And so I wiped everything off of it. I just put the basically there's an app that you put on it to hook it up to play the flexible video scope. Plugged it in, put it inside of the blade, and created a system for them so that they could have a smartphone with the video scope in the blade attached to it. And I gave it to them, and I sent them on the medical mission trip, and they loved it. You know, they sent me video back, and I got a Facebook message from one of the anesthesiologists who went on the trip, and she said that everybody used it, that it was really helpful for them, and that she wanted to be the first one to buy one. You know, and so for me, I think that was really a light bulb moment. That wow, this, and she said all the locals, the Filipino anesthesiologists wanted one for themselves too. So to me, that was really a light bulb moment that you know, this might be something that a lot of people could really find helpful.
I gotta stop us right there. This talk is going on a good long time, so I'm gonna have to break it up into 2 videos. It's great talking to Bryan, and next week we're gonna get more into the mission trips, the patents, how he got the designs done, how he collaborated with some other CRNAs for design and research, and just the way that COVID impacted his Air Angel blade and how that came into use. So tune in next week for that video. We'll see you next time. Let's bolt out.